Hello everyone, welcome back to a new video. Last week, my dad and I showed you how to walk a distressed property and ways to identify potential red flags in a fix and flip project. So this week, as a follow-up, I want to take you through our underwriting process start to finish. I'm going to show you how we find and identify comps, set a rehab budget, go through the other numbers, and determine a potential ROI for a property. And it's super important to have a really strong understanding of your numbers before you go to write an offer. So one, you don't sell yourself short and you're writing a competitive offer. And two, to hopefully avoid finding yourself in a bad situation where you're losing money on a deal. Because that is the number one thing that you want to avoid in real estate, is losing money on a project. So keep watching and let's get started. Welcome to the A3 Analyzer, as we like to call it. My dad developed this spreadsheet for us as a way to get our numbers as close as possible and as accurate as possible when underwriting a deal, because in our very first project ever, we were using a pretty basic spreadsheet and it didn't calculate certain numbers in escrow that are really important, like closing costs. So we were all set to close escrow and we were $37,000 short at the time of signing. So my dad had to pull $37,000 out and wire it into escrow last minute. So since then, he said we will never find ourselves in that situation again, and the A3 Analyzer was a result of that situation. So if you look down at the bottom here, there's a few different sheets to work off of, and the one that we're going to start with is the comp data. So we assess our comps based on these criteria over here. So you have living square footage, lot size, built within 5 years, price per square foot, same property type, whether it's sold within 6 months, if it's in the same subdivision, across from a major road, or located within half a mile. And after you enter in all this criteria, it will give us a score and we will know whether or not that is a good comp to use. And finding comps is one of the most important things about underwriting a real estate deal, because it will tell you how that project is going to go. The numbers don't lie, the criteria doesn't lie. So we always want to start with finding really good comps. And you can find comps for the buy, so a comp that will justify your offer price, and then you can also look for comps that will justify your ARV or after repair value. So if you look over here, the first block is for the subject property. I've already entered in the information here. So 4-bed, 2-bath, 1,800 square feet, yada, yada, yada. I will go through these in more detail in a second. Now, I also want to highlight this grade up here is really important, because not all comps are created equal, and grading them will identify whether it's a buy comp or a sell comp. So the way that we work through these grades, an A would be a property that was recently renovated, up to date on current trends, and more or less move-in ready. A B would be a property that has had some updates, I'd say within the last 10 to 15 years, but somebody may want to come in and still do light renovations to bring it up to today's standards. A C grade would mean that the home is more or less in original condition and you could move in, but most likely somebody would want to come in and do pretty extensive renovations to the home. And a D grade would mean that the property is more or less condemned, it's not livable. We'll usually give a D grade if we come across a listing and there's no photos. That's always kind of a telltale sign that the home is going to need major renovations. So there's a few different websites that you can use to find comps. one of them being your local MLS. You do need your real estate license for access to the MLS. And I actually don't always love using the MLS for comps. I find that the data that they use is different than the criteria that we're using to run our numbers. So it can be helpful for photos and listings and things, but I actually prefer using a title website. And you don't need a real estate license to have access to a title website. I would recommend that you find a local title rep, develop a relationship with them, and then they should be able to give you access to whatever database that they use. And I typically like these numbers and these comps a little bit better. You can also use a lead generation platform. We use Property Radar because it's really good for California and the West Coast. So depending on your market, it may be something slightly different, but this is also really helpful. This gives you a deeper look into the home itself, the loans, the equity, who's on title, everything like that. So if we scroll down, we have more of our comps here. So I am going to try and find one or two buy comps that will justify a potential offer price. And remember, we are trying to find a property that matches all of this criteria here. So let's start with title. And I was doing a little bit of digging already, and this one here, that is comp number 1. This was actually a flip. So I'm gonna come back to that, and we're gonna use the current listing because it's for sale now as a potential ARV comp, but I'm gonna ignore this price here when it sold last November for $870. So let's look up 3701 East Spring Street. Off the bat, I like the look of this. It sold for $1,030,000, 4-bed, 3-bath, 1,800 square feet, and it was built in 1965, and the lot is 7,800. So this looks like this could be a pretty good match. So I'm gonna take all of this data here, and I can actually come across this way, and we're gonna scroll down on our worksheet here and input all of the information that we have. Almost done inputting all the information. I just want to point out two things. So one is going to be the Z estimate here, and that is taken from the Zillow listing. It's just Zillow's database or way of assigning a property value to the home since it's sold. So you can see that it sold for $1,030,000, and the Z estimate has it at $1,049,000, which just means that it's appreciated slightly since last November when it sold. And then the last thing we want to do is grade the property. So we're going to pull up the photos, and I can already tell what I'm gonna give this property just going based off the photos. So as you can see, there's no trash, it's clean, it looks, you know, functioning, operable, I guess I would say, but most people buying this home would want to come in and renovate. There's also a pool, and our subject property does not have a pool, and in our market, that doesn't really affect the value too much. So we still use a comp even if it does have a pool and the subject property doesn't. For us, when you get that appraised, it's really not significant. So I'm gonna grade this property a C and make sure that I have everything else in there, and it's in the same subdivision and it's not across from a major road, so I left those alone. And let's scroll up and see what it scored. So it scored a 9. That means that is a really good comp. That's basically the best comp you can get. If a comp scores a 7, we still will use it. A 6 we don't want to use, and anything below that, but 8s and 9s are what we're shooting for. So that is a really great comp for us. Now let's scroll down to comp 2 and go back to our title website and see if we can find something else. Let's see, this 547 North Wrightwood sold in November, $1,280,000, 2,100 square feet. It's a little bit bigger. Let's look it up in Zillow and see what it looks like. I have a feeling this might be an ARB comp. Yep, I can tell instantly. So let's take a quick look at the photos. Okay, so this is a good comp, but let's revisit this as an ARB comp. I want to find one more good buy comp. So let's check Property Radar. Let me see if there's anything else. So there's 1 and 2 here that are super close by. What's this? 3803 East Palm. Okay, so this is going to be not a buy comp based on the photos. Let's keep looking. This Esplanade was another ARB comp. 9, if we go down to 9, sold for $1,090,000. It's a little bit smaller than the subject property. 4431 East Silverleaf. And this is where it can be helpful to kind of jump back and forth between a couple different websites because the data is going to be different, and usually I'm having to comb through all 3 of my websites to find the most accurate comps. So this one is interesting. It's definitely original kitchen, looks like original paneling. You still have those soffits. Maybe the bathrooms were kind of updated at some point. We have another pool, and it's 1,500 square feet, so it's a little bit smaller, but this could work. So let me input this into the spreadsheet and let's see how it scores. Now that I have all of the data in here, you can see that the list price was $1,050,000 and it sold for $1,090,000. So that's a really good sign for the market that it sold above asking. The Z estimate has it at $1,100,000. That's a good sign. That means the property is appreciating, and I gave the grade a C. Some might give it a B. I'm pretty aggressive with my grading, so I went ahead and gave it a C, and then same subdivision and not across from a major road. So let's scroll back up and see what score we got. Comp 2 scored an 8, so that's really good. That's another great comp that we can use to justify our price on the buy side. You can see here that the price per square foot was above 20%. That just means that it sold above asking, so that's fine. That's actually a good sign. So I'm super happy with those 2 comps. I want to find one more buy comp. When I'm first doing a worksheet, I really just like to focus on the buy comp so we can write a strong offer, but I will find one ARB comp that we can use so I can show you guys how that is going to adjust the criteria here. So let's head back over, and where did I find it? I just came across it. Oh, it was actually on the MLS. Here we go, 3803 East Palm. Let's see. Oh no, it wasn't that one. Ooh, this is good. This is really good. I like the look of this. You can tell it's pretty much original, and it might be the exact same floor plan as the subject property based on the photos. So this is a win for the MLS. Let's see. And how far are we? Oh, perfect. It's literally around the corner. 4.2, 1,800 square feet. Lot size is the same. Year built is the same. Awesome. Now this is pending. It hasn't sold. So I will use these comps, especially if it's pending. That means that they are about to close escrow, and this was only 4 days ago. So that's a pretty good sign. Now the list price is $1,050,000. We don't know what it's going to end up closing for, so I'll usually just keep the list price and the close the same, and you can always go back in later and adjust the numbers once they have closed escrow. So I'm going to input this data and I will be right back. Okay, the data is in for comp number 3. I scored it a D. Everything else is in. I updated the list price to $1,099,900 because that was the initial list price, and then they dropped it $50,000. So it looks like they're pending for $1,050,000 or somewhere around there. Z estimate is in. It's the same subdivision and across from a major, not across from a major road. So let's scroll back up, and we have another 9. Yay, that's so good. These are really, really good comps. I'm super happy with all of those. This is going to be great when writing our offer because we know our numbers, we know what's gonna work, and we know what the homes are closing for around us. And that will also tell the listing agent whether they're crazy by listing where they're at or if they're right in line with the market value. Okay, so 3 out of the 4 comps are in. I'm gonna use one ARV comp that I found that was actually a flip. That was the one that I was talking about earlier. Let's go back to the MLS. So this one here on North Esplanade, that's pending for 1175. So this home closed last November, I believe, for $870,000. It's now relisted 5 months later for almost 1.2 million. And this looks like another home that is the same floor plan. Yeah, this is definitely a flip. And I would score this an A. Okay. Let's input this data as our last comp that we're gonna look at. Now that we have all of our data in for comp 4, I gave it an A. You can see everything else here. Let's scroll back up and see what the grade is for comp 4. We got another 9. That's amazing. So as you can see, these are all really, really strong comps. This would help us. This helps us underwrite our deal so much more accurately. So this is great. I'm super happy with these comps. Now, once you have identified 4 comps, you can jump over to the second spreadsheet, which is called worksheet. Now, this can look pretty overwhelming at first, and I'm not going to run through every little detail and line item here. If you want, I could definitely do a follow-up video and break this down in more detail, but I'm gonna update what I need to update first, and then we will scroll down and we're gonna look at box number 6 over here, and this is gonna give us our max available offer, so MAO, and then we're also gonna pay attention here to the hold time and escrow and everything like that. The first thing we want to look at in box number 6 is as is value, and you can put the list price here. You can adjust it if you think that they are slightly above market value based on the comps, but for this purpose I am going to leave it at the list price, which is $1,045,000. Hit enter. Next thing we want to look at is the rehab cost. Now, rehab is very nuanced because it depends on your level of finishes, it depends on your relationship with your contractor and the pricing that they give you, and there's a few different ways that you can determine rehab. We are at a point now, and I will say the more properties you walk, the more that your confidence grows. You will start to just kind of know a ballpark rehab when walking a property. But one way that you can do it that is a little bit more specific is going off of price per square foot. So let's say you want to put A quality high-end finishes in a home, that might be $80 per square foot. If you want it to be nice, but maybe it's not super high-end, you're kind of in the mid-range, you could do $60 to $70 a square foot for rehab. Or if the home is, you know, maybe going to be a rental, or you're not overly concerned with putting premium finishes in there, you just want a quick in and out, pretty basic flip, your rehab price per square foot might be a little bit lower. Now, I know by walking that property, we would probably spend anywhere from 160 to 180 on that house, depending on if the wiring needs to be replaced, if the plumbing needs to be replaced, right? Those potential repairs that cost a little bit more. And my knowledge of the area, it's a nice area, but it's not super high end. You know, we are kind of on a busier street, so I know that's going to affect everything. So I'm going to put the rehab at 170. And this isn't concrete. This can of course change, but I'm going to start with 170 and see sort of where we end up. Now we want to come down here and look at the offer and purchase price. Now, when I am submitting an offer, I like to be pretty aggressive. I trust my numbers, I stand by my numbers, and I found that that has helped me with building rapport with agents. When I write an offer, it might not be the highest, but I know that that number is there for a reason. I know I'm not going to back out of escrow because we've already done our due diligence and we know whether it's a good deal or not. And we have found ourselves in multiple situations now where we're the backup offer or they initially rejected us, and they'll come back and reconsider because the other buyer that gave them what they wanted or gave them more didn't have the best intentions. So if we are just going based off of the math, I usually like to start around 68 to 70% of the purchase price. Now, if there is quite a big margin on the deal and the ARV is really nice, I might give them 70 to 75 of purchase price. So let's see, $1,045,000 times 0.7. So that offer price, so 70% of purchase would be $731. I know that offer is never going to get accepted, but I also know that they are priced a little high based on that ARV comp. And I know that the ARV comp that we used, that was a flip, that sold for $870 just a few months ago. So they're definitely overpriced. Keep in mind, this is all going to come down to your comfort level with writing an offer, the numbers that you want to see out of it. We are not afraid to walk away from deals when we're not happy with our ROI. We always try and meet a minimum threshold for what we think is right and the effort that we want to put into a job. So, offer purchase price, that's really up to you at the end of the day. They're at $1,045,000. To be honest, I would not pay more than $850 to $870. I would want to get it at the same price that that other flip did, because the margins on this I'm seeing are pretty slim. So let's say I'm going to be super nice and give them $900 as an offer purchase price. The last line item here is going to be our ARV selling price. This is another thing, it's not guaranteed. You're going to have your best estimate here, and if we go off of comp number 4, that is currently in escrow for $1,175,000. Let's say by the time we're done, the market's a little better, we're hitting it in summer, let's push it. Maybe we sell it for 1.2 or 1.25. Because I know our quality, our finishes are always incredible and they really speak for themselves. So we can be pretty optimistic here about the ARV. Let's put $1,250,000 in there. And would you look at that? Our margin is 1% or $11,000. So let me make sure I have the hold time here at 6 months. 6 months is pretty typical for us for a quick flip. We like to be in and out. If it's straightforward, we like to be in and out within 3 months, and then it's about 2 months to sell. So I can be a little bit more aggressive here and change the hold time to 5 months and see if that helps our numbers. Margin 2%, $22,000. So for us, this would not be a deal that we make an offer on just solely based on the numbers. Again, your expectations might be different than ours. 22,000 is still a good amount of money, but for us, putting in 5 months of work, it's not a deal that we would consider taking on. Now, you can keep playing around with the numbers here. Maybe we lower the rehab, maybe we go super conservative, hope that in inspection we don't find anything crazy, and we bump that down to 150. Offer purchase price 900 is pretty aggressive. That's like 150 under asking, and most listing agents are very stubborn people and they don't like to consider offers that are more than 50,000 below. ARV selling price, I wouldn't really want to touch that because again, you don't know how the market is going to shift and change over the next couple of months. The time of year is good, but based on the comps that I'm seeing, I don't think the ARV will be close to 1.3. So you can bring your rehab down. You're now sitting at 43,000, 3%, and maybe that's something that you would want to consider writing an offer on. That is how we would begin the underwriting process for our potential projects. And there is quite a few more steps in this. We have a whole other sheet down here that talks about the cost to close and the cost to sell, little details that go into the more holistic view of underwriting a deal. But for today, I just wanted to run you through how we find comps, how we score them, the criteria that we use, and the beginning process of structuring an offer and setting a rehab price. If you want me to continue this in another video, I can go even more in depth showing you our analyzer. And if you want access to this, let me know in a comment down below, and we are more than happy to email this to you so you can start to play around with it and use it to underwrite your potential deals. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in our next video. Bye.